Welcome to the Brain from Knowing to Doing. This is your Brain on AI series, and I'm delighted to have with me today Gary Bolles. Gary Bolles is the author of The Next Rules of Work, which is the framework of today's podcast. He's the chair of the Future of Work for Singularity University. He's a global speaker to hundreds of companies and educators and work decision makers in dozens of countries. He has 1.4 million registered LinkedIn learners. He's a partner of Charrette LLC, the co-founder of Next Collabs, and the co-founder of eParachute.com. Gary, it's been such a joy to get to know you over the last few months, and very excited to do this podcast with you today.
I look forward to every conversation. It's going to be awesome.
So, Gary, where I'd like to start, last week's podcast on Your Brain on AI was with Byron Reese, and he emphasized this notion that we don't as a society have a great collective memory. And he used the example, as you know, of this remarkable, every 50 years, we destroy half of the jobs with technology and replace them with other, better jobs. And yet somehow that context is lost. And to me, the prescient context of your dad's work, What Color's Your Parachute book, and your own book in my mind, provides the most incredible framework that has got a collective memory and an incredible context for us for AI. But give us the snapshot of your dad's book and how you use that in your current framework.
So I was lucky enough when I was not interested in college. I'd barely escaped high school and did a series of odd jobs. But it so happened my father was a recovering minister who ended up writing the world's career manual called What Color's Your Parachute? And one of the odd jobs I did at the age of 19 was to be trained as a career counselor in his methods. And one of the underpinnings of What Color's Your Parachute is to help people to understand their own skill sets, the other characteristics of the things that they love to do in the context of work. And I found that what I loved was Silicon Valley. So I went off and have worn about every hat you can wear in Silicon Valley, from tech executive to entrepreneur. But my father and I reconnected around issues related to how work was changing 10 years ago. And he passed away 5 years ago, and I realized that there was still much more work to be done. He was this incredible innovator around the processes by which individuals make career decisions. But I felt that there was a much bigger landscape that we need to be examining. In a world of exponential change, which is what we talk about so much with Singularity University, the opportunity for us to have the kinds of processes that allow us each as individuals, but also as organizations, as societies, to continually navigate a world of exponential change. We need those strategies. And so my father had some very basic, some very elegant, simple processes for helping us to understand our own skills, to be able to understand how we can apply them in the context of work. And I realized that offers us some great insights that we can build on to then help each of us to be able to have the kinds of strategies. And I talk about mindset, skill set, and tool set, that those are the three legs of the stool that help us to navigate a world of exponential change.
Great. So take us through, and by the way, how many people read your dad's book? I seem to come across it everywhere.
10 million copies in print. 17 languages. He rewrote it. He updated it every year for 42 years. So one of his favorite jokes was that he'd written 42 different books. They just all had the same title.
And could you just also briefly, before we move on to the AI specific context of this, the reversal of the triangle in terms of where we are today, but how's the fundamental philosophy changed from your dad's time to now?
So there's some real consistent elements in the rationale for work, and the simplest way that I talk about it is that the old rules of work My father first wrote his book in the late 1960s. The old rules of work followed, in many cases, in organizations, a sort of industrial era mindset of hierarchical structures, of sort of working our way up a ladder of the meaning of work, from what we could get paid for, hopefully what we could be good at. My father empowered people to think about what they love. And I talk about how those priorities have flipped, that especially young people, not all young people and not just young people, but have sort of flipped, where many are now asking about the purpose or meaning that they can bring into the world. If they can do that, then they will love doing it. If they love doing it, they'll get good at it. If they get good at it, they'll get paid well for it. And so that's a really significant societal shift in the past 50 to 60 years. And it's a mindset shift, first and foremost.
And here we are in an era of AI where there's just such an incredible spectrum of sort of enhanced positivity and expectations, the sort of bicycle of the mind writ large. Steve Jobs would be amazed by what's going on. And yet, at the other end of that spectrum is that, the potential for a real downside. As I said in the previous podcast, some people you would never have imagined how many people would have taken that bicycle for the mind and turned it into Harley Davidson and driven it off the cliff with polarization and us polarizations that are unimaginable. And yet now we already have supercomputers to go from add to that scenario a sort of quantum computer for the brain. It's extraordinary. It's extraordinary time. There are extraordinary possibilities. It is unprecedented pace of change. So how do you take mindset, skill sets, and tool sets? And tool sets today we focused on AI. How do you see this? Where does that make? How do you find context of the use of AI in your new framework, of the next rules of work? And how can people best be empowered by AI with that framework of mindsets, skill sets, and tool sets?
So I think it's important. We often talk about the future of work. That's a topic I'm often asked to have some opinion on. And so it's always important to step back and ask ourselves, well, what is work? What is it we're using the tool set and our skill set for? And so a simple way to break it down is think of work as primarily being about solving problems and creating value. But let's focus on ourselves as problem solvers. How do we solve problems? We perform tasks. How do we perform tasks? We have human skills. So you can sort of think of work as human skills applied to tasks to solve problems. And what happens with the new AI tool set is that we focus on the tasks and we see all the things that they can automate. And of course, each of us freaks out thinking, oh my God, we're automating so many tasks. There won't be any work for humans. But as Byron pointed out, we go through that shift, every 50 years, and that it may be that period is actually even accelerating. So what is it that the AI tool set can help us to do? It can actually help us to be able to develop our skills more rapidly and effectively. It can help us to solve problems more rapidly and effectively. It can help us with self-knowledge. We can understand our own skills and abilities and how we interact with others. And so all of those are tremendous applications for the tool set to allow us to continually solve the problems of today and tomorrow. However, what is I think so much about the interaction, the collaboration that you and I are doing is we all need a 21st century skill set, and I can talk a little bit about what those things are, but it begins with mindset. As I'm fond of saying, if we all had a 21st century skill set, we'd be in a great position, but mindset eats skill set for lunch, to paraphrase a well-known aphorism. The basic premise that how we approach situations, how we approach problems, how we interact with each other is actually fueled by our mindset. And that we have, as you have pointed out so eloquently, we have control over our mindsets. We have the ability to be able to develop new mindsets. And that is going to be critical in a world of exponential change. Yeah,
I must say it was really fun doing a little course with you and Crystal Fernando on mindsets, which I think is on the link is on your website. But the other part I'd like to expand on that a little, and do come back to skill sets. But before we do, the thing about AI that's just remarkable to me in terms of mindsets is by distilling so much information of the world's history, past, present, especially, it gives us a different level of context if we want it. So now at our fingertips, we can go and distill things at a speed that were unimaginable and get our own opinion and get our own kind of distillation of information. Secondly, the World Economic Forum and others are now saying the obvious, and that is that the future of jobs are going to be, the top jobs are going to be heavily loaded towards creativity, towards innovation. So how does that kind of convergence of the technology and the new mindset, which is flexibility, adaptability, and creativity, how does that fit into your framework?
So one of the ways I think it's helpful to picture for our listeners is to think of the sort of the range of problems that we solve. From the lower left-hand corner is very repetitive problems that we see over and over again and that require mostly sort of analytical thinking or no thinking at all. And then the upper right corner are unique problems we've never seen before. And the only way we're going to solve them is through creative problem solving. And so what happens over and over again, as Byron has pointed out, the history is that the lower left is what we automate. We don't all carry really heavy objects. We use cars to carry them around. There's lots of ways we've automated those tasks, and especially with computers, with software, we've taken a lot of repetitive things that we do over and over again and automate them. Now along comes artificial intelligence, especially generative AI and large language models. And now we have access to such a breathtaking range of information created by humans over the decades and centuries that now we have a huge base of information to pull from when we go to solve problems. And that allows us to solve many more problems that are unique that we've never seen before because we can leverage that body of knowledge. Now, of course, those tools are not perfect. They will never be perfect. They have many flaws because they're built off of human knowledge and we're flawed. However, it gives each individual the ability to stand on the shoulders of many giants in solving new problems.
What is your context about where this is going at the peak of the kind of convergence of AI and the human brain? And how's it going to work?
So first off, I think many of us have been fueled historically by many science fiction stories and movies that we've seen, many of which have dystopian outcomes for humans. I, at one point, had 2,000 science fiction paperbacks in my basement from my ill-spent teenage youth. So I at least have the perspective of what many innovative thinkers have sort of pictured some of the potential impacts, and many of them negative, of the technologies are. So what's important, first of all, I think, is that there are always positive sides and positive uses of technology, and there are also negative sides, and they always that yin and yang come with every technology. And so it's very important for us to always have that sort of measured, cautious optimism about their use, but also to not get so caught up in the pessimism of automating all the jobs and that sort of thing. Just because we've seen this rodeo, we've been to this rodeo many times before, and over time, we are always able to create new and hopefully meaningful work. The challenge is the pace and the scale of the change. And so with this new AI tool set, so much of our initial shock, and it is a collective shock, when many of the technologies that I and my colleagues at Singularity University have been talking about for quite some time suddenly appear. We've been saying there's going to be this artificial intelligence thing that's going to solve a lot of problems, a tool set that can support us solving a lot of problems. And then it appears we have a collective shock for a while as we try to understand just what its impact is. We went through exactly the same sequence with this thing called the internet. And I was running a magazine called Interactive Week. I was editorial director in the early 1990s with much of the same rhetoric that we're hearing today about artificial intelligence. What's different is the speed and the scale. And so that's why we need more effective strategies. It's like the internet, but it's on internet time. You get 2 million people using ChatGPT 3.5 in a month. And that couldn't have happened without the internet infrastructure. And so the reason I'm a cautious optimist is to say, look, we're spending a lot of time in automating these tasks that humans do. We can be using these AI tools to help us to solve problems we have never encountered before. And what we want is for the innovators in Silicon Valley and beyond to commit to that kind of world that we all want, where we can actually be leveraging these tools to be able to continually create new value.
And as a student of the history of scientific revolutions, I'm very aware that often it takes the passing of the previous generation to really set a new paradigm. But that seems to be happening incredibly quickly. And I've predicted within 5 years that there will be a flurry of very serious competitors to the current players who are just kind of embedded into an old kind of paradigm. Do you think that's an exaggeration, or what is your personal view about the likelihood of that kind of change?
It's a very hopeful view of the future, and I share that hope. I'd say what history is kind to some aspects of that hope, and it's unkind to other aspects. So what history says is that there's a paradigm shift, there's a new tool set. There's always a set of nimble players who are able to create new value, to be able to figure out how to be able to leverage that tool set. And they're very nimble and adaptive in being able to convert to the new model. And the platforms that come out of these paradigm shifts are often really, really good reducers of the frictions that are required. So let's think back to when this little company called Amazon was first saying that it could create online marketplaces. There used to be lots and lots of little retail players around the US and around the world. And over time, Amazon became a platform on which those players could all shift to this new model and might even make more money if they were able to crack the code on how it worked. So the good news is that if you can adapt and become effective on those new platforms, so for instance, with the new AI tools, if you were able to use them to, instead of having to hire dozens and dozens of people to do your new startup, to be able to be a startup of one and create all of this value using those tools, and you could be one of those nimble adapters, then absolutely, you're going to be able to create a ton of new value. And that reduction of friction, you don't have to go buy a storefront. You don't have to go hire people. You don't have to buy computer servers. All of that reduction of friction means that more and more nimble people will be able to get value. What you're not going to do is become the new Amazon. That's not likely. And so, yes, there is a potential where some of the tools are so useful, and then we can create other tools with those tools, and then that software can compete with the incumbent players. That would be marvelous. It's not what history tells us. And the resources today that are required to use those tools actually are stunning. And so that's one of the reasons that it ends up concentrating a lot of power in a small number of hands. You know, today we only have one Amazon, one Facebook, one Google, and so on. And so instead, what I would say is, there's a tremendous hope that each of us as individuals is going to be able to solve newer and bigger problems that we might have been able to do before. And in aggregate, that should be a tremendous benefit for societies and economies.
Yeah, that has certainly been the historical pattern of what's happened. Time will tell. I'll give you an analogous example in the brain. Each group, neural epicentrism, believed they were the epicenter. Today, Gary, the slight difference, because the history of scientific revolutions has been that you've got to bayonet the wounded and bury the dead from the old paradigm before people change, right?
Right.
So there is a new landscape that I think really is fertile for a much more rapid paradigm change. There's maybe some like Amazon that are hard, but there are going to be others like solid information that are, trusted information rather than clickbait, gamified, highly corporatized information that could be, and just even access to sensible news, context information that are going to be much easier to do.
So have you found then, because of neural epicentrism and because of that sort of anchoring, we fall deeply in love with our own paradigms, and we fight tooth and nail not to leave them
Yeah, it's our
behind.
strongest bias. Our
Right.
strongest bias is neural receptor is confirmation. We don't challenge our confirmation bias. That is our single strongest bias.
And so have you found what helps to overcome that is simply the access and the exposure to the other ideas?
It's that change is hard. Yeah. Because we have wiring networks, and that's why you and I did that course with Muslim mindsets. We have a mindset.
Yeah.
That is our way of presenting up to the world. It's a mask. And they're veils.
Yeah.
And we don't want to remove that mindset. Why? Because the brain is about safety, and we do not want that safety threatened. And to remove that safety, we need a better safety, which is winning. So we need a sort of guaranteed next phase. So what my understanding has been over these years is the brain is, if you don't fully put in the center that the brain is about safety, you'll lose. Change is hard unless you're guaranteed to win. The second thing, so there's that actual wiring safety first problem for change. The second thing is that we are not taught thinking. So critical thinking, I mean, Socrates knew this 2,500 years ago. What happened? It's hard because you've got to think about the top down, the bottom up details. How well do your emotions and intuitions align with your rational thinking? And last but not least, you've got to challenge your confirmation bias, which is the biggest bias. And lastly, I suppose, is just validated information. We are in an era of information distortion that's about to get a hell of a lot worse. So to pull those three pieces together, Gary, I think the critical thinking, how to deal with change, the confirmation bias, so that you really do not just look at other information, but are open to really absorb that information and the learnings from it. And then thirdly, that you seek out and find the most replicated, valid information, evidence, and context. That's a long answer to your spot-on question. Does that give you a sense of what I'm thinking anyway?
No, absolutely. And so I think that just reinforces everything that we're talking about with the brain and mindset. Is we have to, each of us, step back and understand the mechanisms. That's what your research and your knowledge is so brilliant about, is helping us just to understand that there are mechanisms. We do have these biases. We're doing it all the time. It's the way our brain is built. It's not a bug of the system. These are features. But then how do we take advantage of understanding those mechanisms? And then how do we change our mindset? Because ultimately that's going to frame us in how we solve the next problems.
Yeah. Well, as usual, Gary, it's always just marvelous to speak to you. And I know you're a phenomenal closer. No pressure. You start thinking it's been just remarkable to see. But in my opinion, your framework of the next rules of work, I call it brain sets and mindsets, skill sets and tool sets, AI. What is your final takeaway from this marvelous discussion? What's your final takeaway to people, how to empower themselves with that framework of yours going forward with respect to work?
So I think, Evan, I just wanted to first off reinforce what you're saying. Change is hard. Change is hard. Each of us has gotten to the age that we are on this planet because we've essentially had to become trial and error machines. I mean, nobody sat us down when we were very young and told us how our brains work and told us how we would solve problems and the ways that we would be able to achieve success in our work. We had to sort of figure all those things out. And so change is hard. And so I just want to make sure, first off, that we're showing tremendous compassion to people that are trying to make changes in their lives. However, I think one of the reasons that we're both hopeful is that we've seen that using a variety of these techniques to be able to navigate this world of exponential change can actually help people to be able to change their lives, to change their work, to change their mindset, to change their brain habits. And so I would want to leave people on the note of hope for themselves as individuals, that these are tractable problems. These are steps you can take. My father, you've asked a number of great questions about his work. He was often asked to sort of distill it down as what is the one thing that actually encourages people to make changes in their lives? And he said, hope. Hope. It's the hope that the next thing you do, there might be a positive outcome from it that gets us moving in a more positive direction. And so that's what I think I'd want to leave our listeners with is we can understand these mechanisms. We can create new mindsets. We can understand the ways that we can continually hack our own brains to be able to help us to get achieve the kind of goals that we want. And if we approach this with this structure of thinking about how we change our mindset, how we develop this next skill set that we all need for continually adapting, and then we leverage the AI tool set, which is a watershed moment in human development, that we can have this help to be able to go through these processes in ways we never had before, then everybody should have hope that they can have meaningful lives.